Tonight on KQED Newsroom, newly minted District Attorney Brooke Jenkins shares her plans for a safer San Francisco. And Assemblymember Phil Ting tells us about the new California gun law he authored, which carves a pathway to sue gun makers. Plus, we take a look at the wildfire threat in California and other top stories in the Golden State with our panel of reporters. Also, a close-up view of those indelible, incredible images from the James Webb Space Telescope is this week's Something Beautiful. Coming to you from KQED headquarters in San Francisco, on Earth, this Friday, July 15th, 2022. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. It has been little more than a month since San Francisco's progressive district attorney, Chesa Boudin, was recalled from office. Now, San Francisco has a new district attorney, Brooke Jenkins. Jenkins is a prosecutor who worked for DA Boudin, but quit in protest over some of his decisions. She then became the lead spokesperson of the effort to recall her former boss. Last week, Mayor London Breed tapped Jenkins to take on the job herself. District Attorney Brooke Jenkins joins me now. DA Jenkins, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you are truly 1 week to the day into the new job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you have spent the day putting your house in order. You are in the process of bringing new people in, and you have fired more than a dozen people in the office as well. Tell us about what you're hoping to accomplish with these changes.
Yes, I want to bring in a new management team that is full of prosecution experience. I announced 3 new members of the team who comprise about 50 years of prosecutorial experience, which I think is going to be critical to moving forward with my promise to the public that accountability will be restored to the justice system in San Francisco, and that we will be the best type of advocate that we can for victims in the courtroom.
And one of those is Nancy Tung, who had run against District Attorney Boudin in the past. Another worked alongside you in his office and also left under his time, right? So you are bringing in people who are opposed to that vision of what was. Tell me about the firings that you are in the process of putting forth.
You know, like I said, I just want to make sure that I have a very strong management team that is dedicated to balancing reform and public safety. And sometimes that takes some shifts, you know, as it does in any new administration. But I'm very, optimistic about what is going to happen with the management team in the office and how we are going to begin restoring some law and order to San Francisco.
So let's take me just a step back. You were a prosecutor under Chesa Boudin. Why did you quit and join the recall campaign?
Because I felt that the decisions that were being made recklessly and without the public being taken into account, and issues of safety being prioritized as they should be in a district attorney's office.
So you're now in the hot seat, right?
Yes.
What are you going to do that's different? What is the number one thing that you think to yourself, man, if I do nothing else in my time in office, I am going to get this thing done?
I think we have to go back to holding repeat offenders and repeat violent offenders accountable. I think that has been lost in this system, and that cost us many lives over the past 2 years, having repeat offenders go out and reoffend in lethal ways. And so I am committed to making sure that those who decide to live a life of crime and chronically commit crime in this city accountable. And so that is a part of one of the main things that I want to accomplish, as well as I've said, balancing that need for reform. That's not going away. It's still very much a priority in our office.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and talk about that? Which are the reform measures that you think, there was benefit in this? You agree with the former DA?
The establishment of his Innocence Commission, that is something that I do plan to continue. I think working to exonerate wrongfully convicted people is essential work that is necessary in this system. We continue to hear story after story of people who have spent decades in prison because evidence was lost or not available at the time, and so that is work that I want to see continue.
One of the things we heard often during the recall was that, you know, from the recall campaign generally was that police felt they shouldn't make these arrests, they shouldn't bother because there was no accountability in the system. Do you agree that that was happening?
Yes, I think the morale amongst the San Francisco Police Department had terribly declined over the past 2 years, because when they're going out risking their safety sometimes and putting in long hours to solve cases, and they're seeing people return back out onto the street within sometimes hours and having those cases be dismissed, that can affect someone's eagerness to do their job, and it doesn't justify not doing your job. But I'm hoping that the restoration of accountability in this system will motivate the police to understand that their work is valued here in San Francisco, and they are an essential partner with respect to achieving public safety.
So would it be fair then to say one metric by which the public should judge you would be to see if police arrest rates go up?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think a lot of it is how people feel, right? If people start to see more action on the part of the police and more action within the DA's office to hold offenders accountable, I think they should hopefully start feeling different as they walk about the streets. There will also be data, of course, that they can look to support whether or not we are doing everything in our power to hold offenders accountable and to promote public safety. But I'm hoping that we can restore a feeling of safety as well, because that's what's been lacking for quite some time.
How do you measure that feeling?
You know, can you walk outside and not be robbed, right, repeatedly? Because I think that's a part of what's happening. Can we get the number of hate crimes to decline in this city? Can we stop people from feeling that this is a place where you can come and walk out with bags of goods from our convenience stores with no consequence? And I'm hoping that we can see numbers of those situations decline.
By when? We've got a few months until November when you're going to be up again. Yeah. Potentially former DA Boudin would run against you. We don't know who else may. Do you expect that people should be able to see the effect of your work by November?
Myself and the attorneys in my office are going to work tirelessly to make sure that we start seeing those effects immediately. And we've already begun that work. And so I am hoping that each and every day people see slow progress in that respect.
So it sounds like I hope so.
Hey, it's one day at a time. It's one day at a time. And that's the best that we can do, is to go into court every day and make sure that we are promoting accountability and that we are using every power available to us to promote public safety and to deter criminal behavior.
So this isn't just theoretical for you. You personally have had family interactions with the law, and you've also had a personal experience that had you pivot into this work.
Yes. You know, I was raised by my mother, who's African American. I grew up hearing my grandmother talk about one of her older brothers who died in police custody in segregated Texas at the time, and hearing that they always believed that he was, you know, killed by the police, despite the story being otherwise from the police. Watching family members be, you know, told that they fit the description and held up for that. And so it was very personal to me to try to be within law enforcement, to be a diverse representation from within. But I practiced corporate law for a number of years, and until I got pregnant with a son, my husband and I were very excited, and I went into premature labor, and our son ended up passing away shortly after his birth. His name was Justice, and I knew that after Justice died that I needed to find a new sense of purpose for my life, and I thought that being a voice for those who had also suffered some type of loss within the criminal justice system would give me that purpose, and it truly has.
Well, I am glad to hear that, and we're looking forward to the work that you will be doing. I asked District Attorney Boudin this question. I think it's only fair to ask you, during this time, do you have a song or a power ballad that's keeping you going? Yeah, and it's the late Nipsey Hussle's song, Grinding All My Life, because it's a grind, and it's going to be a lot of work to get this city back to where it needs to be. But I'm committed to working tirelessly to do so, and I'm going to be playing that song as we go along. All right. District Attorney Brooke Jenkins, thanks for your time today. Thank you. There have been more than 300 mass shootings in the United States so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive, including tragedies in Uvalde, Texas, Buffalo, New York, and our state capital, Sacramento. California's governor and the legislature acted swiftly in response. While our state already boasts some of the strictest gun control laws in the nation, a few new ones have been signed into law just this past week.
Well, it's well known that nearly every industry is held to account when their products cause harm or injury. Well, except one, the gun industry. The gun lobby, well, it spent millions and millions of dollars buying off politicians to shield themselves from any liability. Our kids, families, and communities deserve to live without the worry of gun violence. And with Assemblymember Ting's bill, gun makers will finally be held to account for their role in this crisis.
Assemblymember Phil Ting from San Francisco joins us now in studio. Assemblymember, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So tell us about this new law you authored and what it'll do.
Well, we're so proud to get AB 1594 signed into law by Governor Newsom. This is modeled after a law that New York passed last year. We've been following it very closely, so we've been working on it for about a year. It's already been tested in federal court, and basically what it says is that the gun industry should be held accountable for their actions, just like every other industry is by consumers. You know, whether you're the auto industry, whether you're the toy manufacturer, whether you're any kind of company in this country, you have to hold yourself accountable to consumers. And what we're saying is we're asking people to do the same thing with the gun industry.
Isn't there a federal protection, though, for gun manufacturers? Will California's new law really stand up in the courts?
Absolutely. The way the federal law was written, it actually allows states to opine on this particular issue. So we actually studied PLACA very closely, which was passed in 2005, which gave the gun industry sort of a blanket federal shield. But by looking at that, we did notice that states could definitely say that our consumers could hold the industry accountable if they were negligent.
Okay. Well, you know, in response to your legislation, the National Rifle Association had a thing or two to say, not surprisingly. I want to read you a section of their response letter. They said, AB 1594 seeks to frustrate law-abiding gun owners and the firearms industry by empowering tort attorneys and politically motivated public attorneys to drive firearm, ammunition, and firearm accessories manufacturers, wholesalers, and dealers out of business with frivolous litigation. How do you respond to this concern about business owners and whether they're going to be unfairly targeted with frivolous lawsuits?
Yeah, I would respond by, you know, we had a parent testify at every single one of our hearings. Her son was in a shooting at a Jewish daycare in LA in the 90s. And they started suing the gun industry, and they were hoping for their day in court, hoping for their day of justice. And as their case wound its way through the federal court system, they were ever so optimistic. Well, when PLACA got passed in 2005, this case was dismissed. And what we say is this industry needs to be held accountable for the death and carnage they put on our city streets. Every industry is responsible for what happens with their products. This is the one industry that's the exception.
So frivolous lawsuits, that concern? You think the lawsuits are not frivolous or they should be filed anyway? Go ahead and, you know, nag and bug and pester the gun manufacturers.
Well, one, you have to be a victim of a gun violence to sue. Two, you could be a large city or you could be the attorney general. So I don't see a lot of frivolous lawsuits. But again, the lawsuits would have to be attached to shootings. And I don't think that any of us feel that shootings on our streets are frivolous to begin with.
Let's talk about the safety standards in California and where we are right now. I'm curious about this in particular because I'm wondering what might be coming next. The Giffords Law Center, which looks at this concern about gun violence throughout America, has said California is the safest state to be in. Californians are 25% less likely to die from a mass shooting than people in any other state or overall in America. So what is next here in California? Are we done with legislation surrounding the gun industry and gun violence, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, it's too bad that the gun lobby doesn't focus on what we're trying to focus on, which is to try to get guns out of the hands of the wrong people. I think they'd be happy with more guns on our streets in every single part of our streets. And what we see is the more guns that are in the hands of the wrong people, the worse things happen. We saw that awful shooting in Sacramento, 2 blocks from the Capitol. And so while we do believe California is safer than other states, it's still not safe enough. If you or I have to worry about whether or not it's safe to send our children to school, we really haven't made our streets safe enough in this state.
All right, I want to turn to another topic now. Another issue you've been active on and that we've covered on this show is plastics pollution. The last month, Governor signed SB 54, which puts some of the strictest limits on single-use plastics that we have seen so far. I'm curious your thoughts on that. I'm sure you were cheering that on.
Yeah, I mean, that bill was a work in progress for a number of years, and frankly, it was because a ballot measure was coming down the pike that the industry finally said, hey, we either get a ballot measure, which could be worse, or we're going to get legislation that we could really work on. So we're really proud of Senator Allen, all the work that him and the advocates did to get this groundbreaking plastics legislation. Really takes a bite out of single-use plastics. We use way too many single-use plastics in our daily lives. We saw it go up during COVID with all the takeout containers. We all think they're recyclable. They're not. They end up going in landfill, and they're really there permanently. And so what we want to do is see a reduction of single-use plastics. But I also have a bill that I'm doing with Assemblymember Jackie Irwin to recycle thermoforms. Thermoforms are those clamshells where you put strawberries in. They're the takeout container clamshells. Really try to make that a circular economy and get those recycled. And so we need to do both. We need to reduce the use of these single-use plastics, but the ones that we have in the waste stream, we got to figure out how to recycle them and really kind of put the industry on notice. Okay, last few seconds here. Anything else you're working on that you'd like to share with us? You know, one thing that we were here talking about before was around jaywalking and tolls. We want to make sure that streets are safe for everybody without worrying about citation. And because of some reporting that one of your reporters did, we took on legislation to make it more equitable for people and easier for people to pay their tolls. And we're excited about getting that legislation through too. Okay, Assemblymember Phil Ting, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for having me. The first 6 months of the year have been the driest in California's recorded history, setting us up for yet another serious wildfire season. Crews have been battling wildfire in Yosemite National Park, where a big blaze has threatened ancient sequoias. Joining us now to discuss the latest on this fire and California's other top news stories this week are KQED climate editor Kevin Stark, KQED politics and government reporter Guy Marzorati, and joining us by Skype is Grace Toohey, a breaking news reporter with the Los Angeles Times. Thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it. Kevin, kick us off here. What is the latest in Yosemite with this fire, and what else should we be thinking about with wildfire in California this season?
Absolutely. Well, in California, in wildfire season, if we have good news, let's take it. Here it is. The Washburn fire in Yosemite is going to continue to burn, but park ecologists say the giant sequoias will likely survive. In fact, they're probably going to benefit from this fire. It's great news. The forests there need fire. It's part of the ecosystem. More broadly in California, we have megafires because, a history of fire suppression around the state has loaded our forests with wood to burn. In Yosemite, they have done a really good job of fire mitigation, going in and doing controlled burns and forest thinning. Fire scientists say, this is a model for the rest of the state. Our forests are overloaded. There's a lot of extra wood out there. It's a terrible drought. This is the third year of a terrible drought. So all that wood is dried out. It's baking in heat waves that are exacerbated by climate change. And this is the bad news. Every summer in California, it is 3 degrees hotter annually than it used to be. And so, when we have a really dry year like this, it is setting the table for a big fire. Okay, well, and obviously we look at climate change as really pushing and exacerbating the California climate, the climate globally. And when it comes to California, we have been a leader in reducing our carbon footprint, right? And trying to combat climate change. Here, Governor Newsom has said by 2035, no more gas-powered vehicles will be sold in California. No new ones. It's all going to be electric vehicles. And I want to bring Grace in here because she has been reporting on some California cities which are choosing to not construct any more gas stations. Grace, tell us a little bit about what you're learning.
Yeah, so exactly what you're saying, as California is trying to move towards this future that is less reliant on fossil fuels and gas-burning vehicles, some cities have decided, it doesn't make sense to keep building new gas stations. And so these proposals do not change existing gas stations. Those will still exist. But it was actually Petaluma who did this for the first time last year. And officials there have said, they didn't realize they were kind of starting a movement in climate policy. But what has happened is exactly that. We had 4 other cities follow suit, all in the Bay Area. But it's been interesting to see that policy move across the state and actually now across the nation. So Los Angeles City is considering a similar proposal where they would not construct any new gas stations in the city. And so, it's interesting. It will be interesting to see how that plays out in Los Angeles. It's such a, car-centric city, a little different from some other areas. But, we've also heard that there will be the oil and gas lobby will probably try and stop these kinds of bills. But they've had success so far in some of these Bay Area cities. And it will be interesting to see, how this movement kind of continues to take off.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Grace. It's really interesting to see this sea change, right? Guy, I want to bring you into the conversation here, and we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about inflation, the economy. In a way, it's related. We've looked at these gas prices, right, which have been rising and rising. We have seen a little bit of relief at the pump as oil prices have dropped, but we are definitely dealing with inflation costs that we have not seen in a long time. The numbers that just came out, 9% consumer price index inflation over last year. I don't feel like I've heard a lot from Governor Newsom lately, beyond sending out these stimulus payments. Where do we stand?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, Newsom is kind of ahead of a lot of national Democrats in terms of pivot away from these economic issues in an election year towards more of the conversation around the culture wars. You saw him run these ads in Florida just a couple weeks ago, kind of needling the Republican governor there. I think this is for a couple of reasons. One, as you note, the economic situation for Democrats is not good, right? You have inflation. You have real wages just, plummeting. And I think there's not a lot of good news to share.
So
if you're
stay away
someone
from
like
that
Newsom,
message.
even the things that he's pushing, like those stimulus checks, they're not going to make a measurable difference for months. The other thing is, I think a lot of Democrats feel like national leaders are not pushing back hard enough against some of the rollback of civil rights we're seeing, whether it's at the ballot box, the classroom, the Supreme Court. Newsom is kind of leaning into that.
All right. And he's in Washington, D.C. this week. Who's he meeting with? Why is he there?
Yeah, the nominal reason is to accept this award around education policy. But I think it's really, again, to kind of put himself out there on the national platform when it comes to the culture war conversation. We shouldn't be surprised, right? When did the nation first learn about Gavin Newsom, right? It was 2004 when he was going far beyond national leaders in pushing for gay rights, the expansion of gay marriage here in San Francisco. I think in Washington, you're seeing meetings today with the state's congressional delegation, Vice President Kamala Harris, also with Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, which I thought was notable. He's kind of led the push for gun control bills in Washington. Newsom, right before he left, as you talked about with guest Phil Ting, signed a bunch of gun control bills.
All right, fascinating. One more pivot for us here in this show. We really want to touch on public health today. Grace, you have been talking with people in LA about monkeypox, right? So we know COVID has been a concern, continues to be a concern. The BA.5 variant has now been referred to as ultra contagious. We've got BA.275 hard on its heels. But monkeypox really rose to the level of public discourse in the past week, with public health officials pleading for more vaccines, saying they didn't have enough.
Yeah, definitely. So it's unfortunately another concern that we have to think about. But, public health officials are saying, this is not a, massive public health concern, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind. Right now, I think we have 250 confirmed cases in California. So obviously, compare that to COVID, it's much less. But it is spreading right now, primarily among men who have sex with other men, as well as transgender women. And so, focusing on those communities and trying to make sure that they're getting the access to vaccines and the public health response that they need. And what's been interesting is, I've been talking to actually recently a few men who did get monkeypox, and they're either still under quarantine trying to deal with their symptoms, or a few have actually recovered. But their main concern is, one, it's really hard to get vaccines still, no matter where you are. The federal government has, admitted that they're still struggling to get these vaccines, and therefore they're not trickling down to the states and local counties who give them out, actually. And then the other main concern is that, these are mostly queer communities who are being affected by this. And these are communities that are historically disenfranchised.
All right. And Kevin, I know you've been following this as well. Would you just give us a snapshot of what we're seeing here?
Oh, sure. Well, so there's probably around 80 cases in San Francisco. The Bay has, more than 100. I would just reiterate what Grace said. There are treatments for this if you can get it. We had reporters out in the field all week. And in the East Bay, there was lines around the corner at some clinics. In San Francisco General Hospital, the public hospital, actually ran out of vaccine. You have city officials really pushing the Biden administration for more doses. This is a song and dance we've heard before. The demand is really high, supply is really low. Manufacturers are supposed to be making more, and we'll be following this.
All right. Kevin Stark, our science editor, thank you. Guy Marzorati with the politics team, and Grace Toohey in Los Angeles with the LA Times. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If you're anything like me, this week you marveled over the new pictures of the universe provided by the James Webb Space Telescope. You may not have known that we have a special California connection to the telescope. It was partly assembled here in Southern California, and many Californian engineers worked on the project for years. This week, Something Beautiful showcases the story of this remarkable piece of technology that taps into our collective human spirit of invention, exploration, and wonder. You know, that last image with all those galaxies, NASA tells us that represents just a tiny speck of the entire universe. That just blows my mind. That is the end of our show for tonight. You can find KQED Newsroom online or on Twitter. You can email us at knr@kqed.org, and you can reach me on social media at Priya D. Clemens. Thank you for joining us. We will see you right back here next Friday night. Have a great weekend.